G'day. Welcome to the AgriCoach podcast for families on the land who want to grow their family's wealth and prosperity across the generations. I'm your host, Ben Law, and I'm the financial bloke. G'day. Welcome back to the AgriCoach Wealth and Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Ben Law, the financial bloke, and as always, I'm here to help farming families build wealth, strengthen relationships, and protect their family legacy. Now, in my work with high-performing families, I see a lot of common challenges, but one that comes up time and time again is boundaries. Because let's be honest, when your home and business are one and the same, where do you draw the line? How do you switch off from work when the farm is right outside your front door? And how do you set boundaries without causing tension in the family? To help us unpack this, I've got the perfect guest, Katja Williams. She's the founder of the Ultimate Farm Wife podcast and the Absolutely Fabulous podcast. But she's not just talking about boundaries from the sidelines. She's living it every day. Katja works alongside her husband, Ned, on his family's 11,000-acre farming enterprise, managing everything from breeding stud and commercial shorthorns to raising steers, growing pivot irrigated lucerne, and overseeing cropping operations. She's got first-hand experience of what it takes to keep a farm running while also balancing family life. She knows exactly why setting boundaries is so difficult, yet so essential. Today, we're diving into why even the most successful farming families struggle with boundaries, the biggest mistakes they make, and some practical strategies you can implement right away. So if you've ever felt like work is creeping into every corner of your life, or you just want some peace and quiet for yourself, this episode will be for you. Now, before we kick off, I just want to say in the episode, I have my daughter home sick. Katja has a couple of her kids home sick. And there was a few times throughout the episode where kids would wander in the room and want to have a conversation with mum, which is totally fine. We're all family people. So you might find a couple of cuts in the episode where we've had to cut those out and it might just sound a little bit disjointed in places. And if that's the case, please just forgive us. We're all parents. We're all family here, and just look past that if you can. So grab a cuppa, strap yourself in, and welcome Katja.
Thank you very much, Ben, for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? And I know I've got a daughter home sick today. You've got kids home and sick today. So there could be some time in the next hour that we get some little ones run in. So we've got to be resilient, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Katja, I just want to start off with, who the hell is Katja Williams?
So the short version, Ben, is that I am a farmer, a farmer's wife, a mum of 4 kids who are 5, 4, 2, and 10 weeks old. And I am also a YouTuber and a podcaster.
And where are you based in New South Wales, Katja?
Dubbo, New South Wales is our primary location, but we also have a second farm, which is between Nevertire and Nyngan. So we operate over 11,000 acres in total, and we have stud and commercial shorthorn herds, trade steers, cereal cropping, and centre pivot irrigation, which is growing lucerne hay, which we have at a level of lucerne chaffing. So that's where it goes to a lot of the horse studs and things like that.
Now, we're here today to talk about boundaries, aren't we? And you and I had this conversation, it'll be a month or so ago now, about all the things we could possibly talk about. And you said, Ben, these are all the things I talk to people about on the podcast and with the Ultimate Farm Wife. And the one that really resonated with me was setting boundaries and how to do that in a family, because I see it all the time in really unsuccessful families and really successful families. So let's just kick off first with, just to be really clear for everyone, is what the hell does setting boundaries mean, or what are boundaries in your context of the world?
Yes. So boundaries for the Ultimate Farm Wife. After doing over 90 episodes and talking with many different farming women, both female farmers themselves and farm wives, one of the pillars that came up repeatedly was boundary setting and how we could set boundaries to increase communication on the farm between those who were on the farm as well as in the family farming business, because we're talking about very different relationships and dynamics on a daily basis. and it can get complicated. So setting boundaries are not hard and fast. They are not non-negotiables. They are there to clearly state timeframes, increase communication, and make sure that there is time for yourself, because when you are operating at your highest level, then you can give so much more into the family farming business and into your relationships as well.
Yeah, boundaries. Boundaries for me is, and my wife and I really struggle with this, Katja. So being a farmer's son, and I'm now a business owner outside of farming, but serving the farming community, is my brain is constantly in business, podcast, coaching, dealing with families mode. And my wife's not. And we've had many a disagreement over the years about me trying to have conversations about the business, about anything financially related at any given hour of the day. And I think that's something that many families deal with who are in business, not just farmers. So why do you think this is such a challenge for families to actually set boundaries and maintain them and not have it turn into a complete shit fight?
I think a lot of the time, particularly when I'm talking to the farm wives and female farmers on the podcast, we like to set up boundaries when shit's hit the fan. And it's not the best time or place to be doing that. Usually we want to put these into place beforehand, and we want to make sure they've got a backing and a purpose that's still reaching the end goal for both us personally and for the farm. And one of the things we need to do is actually go back and look at our values and our morals, make sure that each person knows or has reflected on their values and morals, and made sure that that is also going to come into play with their boundary setting. Because if we don't know what someone else's end goal is or what someone else's expectation is, then it becomes really, really hard to manage, and it cuts down that communication. So, not everyone in the farming business will want to do that. But if you sit down and work out your values and morals and what you see going forward on the farm, you can try and communicate that with the farm and then move forward into boundary setting. So if someone thinks that the workday is going to start at 6 a.m. and the other person doesn't think that the business day is going to start until 7:30, then you're going to have miscommunication, and it's going to cause a lot of angst and anxiety. Last thing you want is someone to be driving past the house on a bike, be it blaring the horn when you're still in bed. All of a sudden you're late, you're starting off on the wrong foot, and your next interactions with that person probably aren't going to be fantastic unless you've stopped to take a breath first. So boundary setting can be anything from tasks such as, okay, tomorrow morning, what time are we starting and why? It could be also, okay, around dinner time, as you and I were talking about, no shop talk around the kids, or we can talk about farming around the kids, but we're not going to talk about financial pressures, or we're not going to talk about an interaction that we had, with their grandparents or with their father on the farm that was not great. So again, boundaries are not hard and fast. Like, you can continue to adjust them as your time of life goes, as the farming season goes, as the day goes as well. But putting them into place so that it's clear communication going forwards.
Sort of, I suppose you'd say, kind of like just setting expectations and then communicating around those expectations from both sides. And then, as you said, setting the boundaries that this is what's fair and reasonable, or at least what we've agreed to.
Yeah, absolutely. Those expectations around ththose boundaries and making sure we're all on the same page going forward on the big picture really works in really tightly together to make sure that we're really enjoying our journey in farming as well. We're all here on farm because we want to be here and we want to be able to enjoy it, and we want to be as successful as possible. Now, that doesn't always mean jam-packing every single day. It may also be communicating, okay, I'm really starting to feel the pressure. I think I need to do some jobs tomorrow that aren't necessarily too much on the brain focus side, maybe a little bit more on the automation side. So if I've done something 101 times before and it's a low risk job on the farm, so bringing safety into it, I'm feeling very fatigued. So I'm going to do something that is not going to need a lot of brain power and it's low risk, whether that's a job in the office, whether that's a job, just some domestics around the house. If you're someone who likes your lawns green and they help you relax on the farm and everything's hang off and everything's drying and everything's getting on top of you and you're very overwhelmed, it might be discussing, please, I need to be able to water that tomorrow. It'll take some pressure off me so I can breathe and I can come back to the farm the next day vitalized, and I've done something that I know when I come home will make me relax.
Is this more of a struggle in your experience with men or women? Do you think there's some commonalities around there? And I could get shot for generalising, but I've got my ideas. What's your experience, Katja?
I think it's both.
You've built a scaled, highly profitable operation you're proud of. But what will your legacy really be? If you're 5 to 15 years from succession, now's the time to step back, get clear, and design the next chapter with your family, not just for them. That's exactly what you'll do at the High Performing Families Roadmap Workshop, back this July after overwhelming demand. In 2 days off farm, you'll design your family's 10-year roadmap, align on what matters most, and set a clear plan your whole family can get behind. No fluff, no drama, just strategy, clarity, and serious progress. If you want in, head to agricoach.com.au/take action. Spots are limited. Now, let's get back to the episode.
I think the issues for both are very different. So I know that a lot of the women I talk to, for them, the boundaries they are setting are when you come home or when we come home, because a lot of them work in the paddock and down the farm with their husbands as well, or they are the primary farmer. But when they come home, the boundary is not to talk shop straight away. It's not to go into the office and try and do bookwork instead of creating connection. So one of the boundaries you might set would be, when you come home, can you please say hello to me? Can you check how my day is? Or if you've worked down the paddock together all day, the boundary might be, okay, let's take 10 minutes to just have a cup of tea and check in with each other, not on the business, but how we're doing, because you'll both feel better for doing that and just taking a moment. And then that can also create, okay, what are our next steps going to be for the evening? And what tasks are we going to take on? So even at the end of the day when we've got home, whether that is at 6 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night, there's going to be other jobs and other priorities that need to be done to set yourself up for success the next day. So for me as the primary carer, it means that I need to make sure that the school uniforms are ready to go in the morning. It means the school lunches need to be packed, because that reduces the stress for me in the next morning. If I have to spend an extra 20 minutes, half an hour getting that sorted, then that's going to set us up for success. For my husband, if he has emails that he needs to do because he's not going to get them done tomorrow, then while I'm prepping that, he's doing emails. If it's after 10 o'clock at night, you're not going to be making phone calls necessarily, but you can sit down and plan your day and write some notes to be like, right, this is what I need to do.
That sounds like a lot of communications required and skills around being able to have those conversations in a productive and positive manner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those predetermined boundaries and setting that up really helps do that communication, because it's much easier to turn it into a habit when a boundary is set and you're both trying to work towards that, because you've set that boundary for a reason. And usually the reason behind that boundary is really, really important in someone else also honouring that boundary. So if you can explain why you need it there and help them understand that, then they're more likely to really help you continue with that, because it's going to be positive for them in the long run as well.
So the two words that I've written down here, Katja, on my notes, because I'm a rabid note taker, is setting the expectations and then getting commitments from both of you to adhere to those expectations or commitments.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So one of the things that I really struggle with, and I see a lot of it in dads and mums differently, is the whole transition. So, for example, when I was first started my financial advice business many years ago, is I used to find I'd be talking about it all the way home, into the garage, down to the door, getting ready for dinner. It was just constant. And we made an agreement that we would stop talking about it when we hit the post office. So it's like you drove out of town, you hit the post office, and that was end of conversation. And then all of a sudden it became not past the post office, it was the turn onto the dirt road up the end of the hill. And I really struggle with that whole, how do I transition out of, work mode or business mode, or in your case, we're talking about farm mode, into then family mode. Do you see that as difficult? And how do you find families who successfully are able to do that, some of the strategies that they may do or how they approach it, Katja?
It's definitely difficult. It's very hard to do. It's almost as if you're compartmentalizing different parts of your day and different parts of your life. And that does come with practice, particularly when, your workplace is your business. None of that travel is included in that. You don't have sometimes physical landmarks. So sometimes you need to make physical landmarks. So in one of my interviews with Natasha Arrington, she would say she would have set up a tree or a veranda post, and they would touch the tree or the veranda post. They would do some deep breathing, and that's the transition. Okay, I'm stepping into the family home, or it's a mental shift. I'm changing into my next role. So there's techniques that you could do such as that. The transition is hard, and everyone's method will look differently. So for us, it's more a communication cue or a visual cue. Because we have so many kids, Ben, usually if there's one or more kids around us, particularly the older boys who are picking up and learning everything at the moment, we know that we need to be really careful about our communication so that they may not say anything, but we don't want to cause worry. When you're going between tasks on the farm, I find that's a very similar mindset change as well. So batch tasking for me really helps with my mindset change. And so I would usually communicate, okay, I need one day in the office where I'm going to be doing the book work, or I am spending the next couple of hours working on the business activity statement or trying to sort all this paperwork that's come into the office, whether it's digital or actual physical paperwork. And I need you to help me focus on that, because otherwise it's not going to get done. When you've been on farm for a long time, or when you've been in business for a long time, you'll start to know how long things take, and being able to communicate, write it down, how long that job takes, and that will help you communicate and set boundaries around how much time you're going to need. So on average, if I sit down to do, the BAS, I'm going to take an hour chunk to do it. On average, that's enough within your period that you're sitting down to do it, depending on how big your family farming business is or your business is. And then you can communicate that with your partner. They will help you keep that boundary. So I'm not going to sit down to try and do the book work when I've got all 4 kids at home and they all need my attention, because they're all young. They all really need assistance and attention, because otherwise they're going to get up to no good, Ben. They're going, I'm going to go out of the office and there's going to be flour or something everywhere, and they're making flour angels, or they've eaten all the chocolate and now they're on a sugar high. So if you can work out a boundary around that, a set time frame, and communicate that, then they're going to be able to help you do that.
So Katja, what's some of the big mistakes you see families make when they start to actually have these conversations? Because I'm guessing, like you said, when the shit hits the fan is usually when people start saying, I need to set some boundaries, let's talk about them. What's the biggest mistakes you see people make when approaching this?
I think trying to jump straight into it off the back of that, I think one of the benefits of taking some time and then coming back and visiting, okay, why did we get to, or how did we get to that blow up, and how are we going to stop that from happening again? When everyone has taken, and everyone is different and every farming business is different, depends what the blow up is as well. But when we all take some time to reflect on the activity, and not everyone wants to do that either, Ben, and that can make it really difficult. But with time, that can be easier. And if someone doesn't want to reflect on it and make changes, then that's sort of a cue for yourself as well to be like, okay, what am I going to do differently? Am I going to speak up earlier than last time? Am I going to take a few more moments when I can see that this is coming up, and hopefully that will diffuse the situation? So there's lots of different ways that you can go around that. That's 2 very different ones. So speaking up or taking a step back and some time back to hopefully let that go through. If it's something that's repeatedly happening, then I would suggest raising your voice, but coming from a place of not judgment and not putting in ultimatums, but very much of, I can see that this situation, input your situation, is going to occur again, and it has recurred repeatedly. How do you think that we can, so putting it back on them can sometimes help, because then it will get them to think about it. But other times it can be, we're all here for the future of the farm. We're all here to be happy and enjoy what we're doing. And I think that this problem that keeps coming up is detracting from that. And some family farming businesses love being incredibly productive.
So, Katja, the really interesting thing is I had a conversation with a family very recently, and it was around boundaries. And it was the fact that in this case, the wife and both mum and dad and the kids were involved. They were very high-performing people. They were very successful. They were running a great business. They were all a very close family. But it got to the point where there was absolutely a need for some space and some boundaries. And so in this case, the wife wanted a little bit of time for herself, shall we say. Now, she felt intense guilt about wanting that time, which I think is a common theme we see. It's something I have when I say I need some time for myself. I feel very guilty about that. I think that's not just a rural thing. And it caused a bit of conflict, shall we say. And now conflict is something a lot of families avoid. So I believe these days that conflict can be healthy if it's handled well. And one of the things that really helped, and I just want to tie this back into what you said before and reinforce this, was we've done some heavy work on values. And I won't go into the full details of it, but essentially everyone in the family agreed that kindness was really important in the family. And, they wanted to be kind to each other. And when it sort of blew up, we were able to go back and say, okay, well, mum's looking for a little bit more time here and a little bit of time for herself. Well, number one, everyone agreed that kindness was one of our values. So we were able to link it back and say, well, look, mum has to be kind to herself and give herself that time. And we're not talking about a lot of time. We're talking about a very small amount of time and some boundaries. And then it also allowed her husband to be able to go, oh, okay, yep, look, I get what's going on. I've got to be kinder here because we all agreed. And it kind of anchored everyone back into those family values. And from my point of view, if you have the conversation around values first, and it could be respect, it could be, trust, it could be, whatever those values are. And if you can link it back to there, that means the conversation becomes far more about how we want to behave rather than accusing people for having bad behavior. Is that your experience too, Katja?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think within the family farming business, because you've said that absolutely beautifully, within the family farming business, you do feel guilty when you want to take time for yourself, because it does mean a lot of the time someone else during that period, even if it's 10 minutes, half an hour, someone else has to take on some of the work for the farm, because the jobs on the farm are never done. And a lot of the time we work until the jobs are done rather than within set timeframes.
Or done enough.
Yeah, where you can leave the job and come back to it. So you do feel guilty, because when you take time for yourself, someone else is having that burden. It's the same as when you get sick on the farm. One worker is out, whether that's for a short period of time or a long period of time. So making sure that we are communicating really healthily with, our husband or our partner or our, sometimes it's our in-laws, that you do need that time, but it's going to benefit everyone, including yourself, in the future. Whether that is, at the end of the day or the next day, it will have benefits. If we can communicate taking that time, every day on the farm is different. So we can't necessarily set, okay, Sundays at 3:00, I'm going to be taking an hour for myself. If that works for how your family farming business is set up, perfect, set that boundary. If it's not, it might be, more flexible. What have we got on today? And if they go, oh, we haven't got too much on, great. I would like to set an hour aside for myself where I don't, and be very specific what that hour looks like. It's not, folding laundry. It's not doing office work. It could be, I need an hour for myself where I don't have the kids saying mum, mum, mum all the time, or you're not calling me asking me where something is. Can we just black out? Unless it's an emergency, can we black out an hour where I turn my phone off, or I turn it on silent, more likely than off, and we all make a conscious effort not to contact me during that unless it's an emergency, and set yourself up for that. Can you please do, or when are you doing a task where you can have the kids on farm? Whether it's, handing out hay and they're in the air conditioning in the tractor, whether it's, how about you have that while we have afternoon tea? Making sure that everyone's on board, everyone knows what's happening. Not everyone has to stop when you do, but set yourself up for success and set everyone else up for success by communicating that really healthily and creating those boundaries by letting everyone know where you're at. Because I think a lot of the time, particularly when we feel guilty about that, we hold it inside. And we hold it inside and we hold it inside, and it starts to build and build and build. So, but that also comes with strength for being able to speak up. And I know that's hard in a lot of family farming dynamics, particularly from all the interviews I've done with the ultimate farm wife, because it's not our family a lot of the time.
Well, it's with the in-laws sometimes as well. Like there's extra family that's involved.
It's an extra dynamic. But then also sometimes I'm very good at farm at collecting animals. And one of the things that was really important to me was putting in an orchard, because I'm a bit of a homemaker and a homesteader, and that was really important for my mental health on farm. And so sometimes that also means like, okay, so I've created all this work and now I'm saying, I just need a minute. So sometimes you feel guilty about that and think, maybe I should not have so many animals. But if they're helping with the mental load and they're not against, financial pressures, then, they are still positives that you need to have.
So setting boundaries also, and I'm curious about this, is also about different roles in the business. So in other words, you mentioned before about, I need a day in the office to get the administration up and running, or you need a day in the office to be able to do that, and communicating that with the employees or the rest of the family. But is it also too about meetings, having, if you're going to have a family meeting, a strategic planning meeting, and we're not going to be, thinking about the farm, we're going to try and sit down and communicate about that. So it's going to be an hour, it's going to be sitting around, the kitchen table, or whether it be in the office or something like that. Is that also something else that families need to talk about to set those boundaries as a family, not just about I need some time for myself or I need time in the office?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things that if it's not on the calendar or it's not on the job list, it's not going to get done. For different families and different dynamics, it's going to look differently. Sometimes you need to get the family off farm to have those meetings. Just, again, that mind shift change that we were talking about earlier. Can you switch between working in the family business and on the family business while you're still on farm? If you can't, or if other family members can't, maybe we talk about turning it into a long lunch that we do off farm, or we do it over a planned dinner. So we're all probably guilty of not getting off farm much or as often as we should. So we can kill two birds with one stone by doing that and making sure it's on the calendar, making sure it's going to happen. I know from the Ultimate Farm Wife, a lot of the farm wives are not included in those strategic meetings, even if they are working in the family farming business. So that also adds an extra pressure, because sometimes the farm business, whether it's the in-laws or the parents and the sons or the daughters, might have that meeting. And then there's a whole lot of information that was discussed at that you're then trying to catch up on. So I think as part of that as well, when we're talking about recording things and putting them on the job lists, even if you're not part of that family strategic meeting, if it does go into a communal place, such as a job list, which is visible to everybody, either on a whiteboard or in, a shared document on your phone, or even just in a calendar where everyone's calendars are kind of synced, or you can view their calendar and view yours when you're planning life admin as well outside the farm, particularly when kids and school and everything else are involved, then that can really help with that communication as well. I think it was Benjamin Franklin that said, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And I think that I still see that in a lot of family farming businesses particularly when that information isn't shared through those strategic meetings.
One of the things I also find works really well with the meetings that I'm involved with is we try and that whole transition, because you'll quite often see, I can think of a meeting the other day for someone came in out of the paddock, out of the feed lot, and you can just see their head was back there. And there's two things I usually start the meeting with. Is the first one is our wins. So like, what have we won over the last, what have been our wins since our last family meeting? And that really is a state change, because when you're a business owner or a farmer, you're always looking for problems. So your brain is hardwired for problem. You're running around the paddock. Where's that lame cow? Where's that broken down tractor? Where's that fence that needs repairing? It's problems. And then all of a sudden, when you've got a switch in your brain to go, what are our wins? That's really hard. And it creates a state change. And I'll see this in dads a lot, where you go, what are your wins? And they look at you going, gee, I don't know. I've got the tractor to fix, the spraying to be done, whatever that is. And then all of a sudden you see a state change come over them. And then the second one is around the purpose, like why we're doing this, is creating a statement as a family of what is the purpose of what we're doing. And you'll go back and read that sometimes, and it recenters people back in to go, hang on, I'm thinking about all the problems out here, but our bigger purpose here is to, whatever that might be, have a close family, strong relationships, build wealth, whatever that might be. And those state changes as well can just naturally set those boundaries, and then you get people in the room rather than thinking about outside of the room.
Yeah, absolutely. I think gratitude is sometimes a good way to start those meetings off as well. So what is it that you're grateful for? And that could be anything from, I'm really grateful that we didn't have any breakdowns during, harvest this year, which is almost unheard of. That's worth celebrating. It's, great to be like, yep, we had a great average price with our stock sales this year. I'm really grateful that we have the farm machinery that we have and it's working, so that we don't have to keep finding something else to keep doing. Like, let's focus on what we have, not what we don't have.
Well, Katja, one of the things that you must get to see in your life is families that you've either interviewed or dealt with that have gone from having real problems with boundaries. And can you just share, obviously without any personal details, but a real life success story of a family that had a real challenge with this, and then how they made small changes and what the big results were? Because as Tony Robbins, I think, once said, success leaves clues. So I want to be able to sort of extract and say, okay, well, if you're a family out here listening and you've got troubles with boundaries, here's someone that did it and this is what they did.
So one of my farm wives was having difficulty both with succession as well as narcissism in a family farm. And the combination of those, the more interviews I do, is actually probably more common than we sort of understand in family farming businesses, or at least that's the type of people who come and have a chat to me, either on the podcast or behind the scenes, because not everyone who I speak to ends up being on the podcast. Sometimes we're just chatting one-on-one about that. So this particular interviewee, we tackled both separately. So the first thing we needed to do was tackle the narcissism. And the boundaries that she needed to set was, one, to look after herself and what that actually looked like. Because as a mother with lots of kids and being on farm for so many years, she'd sort of forgotten who she was or who she wanted to be and how to set boundaries, because she was so used to feeding everybody and setting everyone up for success and doing what everybody else needed before doing anything for herself. So she was in burnout and had lost her identity. So we worked on those individually. She got counselling, and that was starting to see great improvements with her and on the family farm. Then she was setting boundaries. Okay, so it got to the point where it was unsafe for her to be around that family member. So they discussed about a role change. Okay, so if they are working on the farm during these times, during these tasks, I'm going to be over here. Say they were doing mustering. Okay, I'm going to be back at the machinery shed. I know we've got fencing coming up next week, so I'm going to be making sure that all the fencing gear's there, and I'm going to make sure that everything is ordered and checked off and set up, so that next week the rest of the farm members can come along, pick up all that fencing stuff. It's all there, it's all accounted for, and off they go. So they were doing other jobs rather than putting themselves in a dangerous situation with that person. And the danger of that situation was more a mental health danger rather than a physical danger. But she was having to both identify it and set boundaries that were going to work, which are really hard both in themselves. So once that she was able to set up herself for protection, she could then look at the kids. Okay, the kids are starting to play up around me because they've lost respect from what other family members are saying about me as their mum. So I'm going to talk to my husband and we're going to not stop access, but limit access so that they're not getting this negative feedback loop about how horrible their mother is when she's doing the best that she can in a really horrible situation. And so she then found that that was helping with the kids, making sure that her and her husband set boundaries around spending one-on-one time with the kids. So rather than spending time as a whole family, it wasn't necessarily working. They were still having some behavioural upsets. So then, okay, we're going to work with each child individually. So we've got a bedtime set. Bedtime is 8 o'clock. One child is going to stay up and either one or both of us are going to spend an extra 10, 15 minutes with that child per night. They found that that was taking care of that. It was filling her cup because she was getting one-on-one time with the kids or time with the husband with one of the kids. A lot of barriers to work on that example, Ben, but then with the succession planning, she was finding she didn't need to feel like she was involved, like she needed to give an opinion, because she knew that she had an advocate. She knew that her husband would come home and after the kids went to bed, they would have a chat about, the succession plan and what they wanted in the future. And so she was finding she didn't need to be in those strategic planning meetings. She didn't need to be in the succession meetings because she had a voice. It may not have going through her partner into those meetings. They were on the same team, so that worked. So just because there's someone with a really hard clashing personality to you, just because there's someone in the family farming business you can't work with, doesn't mean that the whole business needs to fall apart. Boundaries can be really helpful and healthy in that situation to make sure that everyone is moving forward. A lot of the time you can feel guilty because, that puts a lot of pressure on the partner or the son or the daughter to be that voice and to be that advocate. But you're a partnership within yourselves. You've signed up to do this together and you need to do the best for both of you within the family farming business that's still going to have a futuristic view and get you to where you want to be in the future with that family farming business. And sometimes setting those boundaries and tackling each point as it is not as so overwhelming.
I love that. And there are a lot of communication problems within the rural space, and that's a great end of this spectrum of it. I also see a lot of families where things are pretty good. They're just not perfect. And a small little tweak can have an exponential change. And I saw one family, Katja, where, what was it? It was, I need 2 hours a week to do some things that wasn't necessarily either out on the farm or in the office. And it had an exponential change on the family. It was unbelievable. So sometimes it's just small tweaks, in my experience, to be able to do that, which is good. And I think if families can actually sit down and go, well, what are we trying to achieve here? Because at the end of the day, when you actually dig in with families, or my experience when you dig in with families is, one is they want to be financially secure or successful. They want to have a strong balance sheet and they want to be able to provide opportunities for their families to educate their kids, take some time off and not be worrying about every last cent all the time. And number two is they all generally want strong family relationships. When you dig down in it. Now, there could be situations in families where there's arguments with brothers or sisters or parents, etc. But generally, when you find mum and dad and especially younger kids, there is this real drive in almost everyone to have strong family relationships. And so if we can communicate and get people to change the paradigms that this isn't actually taking away from the business or the farm or making it harder, it's actually going to make things easier. Because my experience has been is if you can set some boundaries and you can actually recuperate a little bit of time for yourself or just get really efficient in the way you do things by getting those boundaries, you're actually far more productive. You actually create more value or more throughput in actually doing that. And the example I usually give people is if you've got a piece of machinery running 24 hours a day, full throttle without servicing it, you're going to run into some problems. So you actually got to stop, sharpen the saw, service the machinery. And that's no different with relationships and family and the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Katja, look, I think that's fantastic. I know you're passionate about this as part of the space, but can you tell us a little bit more about the podcast and the business and all those sorts of things. Can you just give us a quick rundown on that for anyone who's acutely interested in you? And then I've got my last favourite question to come back for you.
So the Ultimate Farm Wife is for anyone who is marrying a farmer, moving to the land, or who is integrating into or back into a family farming business. We predominantly hang over on Instagram as well as on the podcast. And this year is also rolling out some workshops, increasing the amount of cheat sheets and newsletters that I put out as well, which are all based off the tips, tricks and advice which have been accumulated over the 90 episodes, to really help with that transition and those identities and wearing all those hats and everything that we've sort of discussed today, including the boundary setting. Later on this year, on April 5th and 6th, we're also having our Farm Wives Conference here in Dubbo, New South Wales, where we're really touching on all the pillars and topics that we've discussed as well then.
Fantastic. Well, I'd highly recommend anyone checking it out. I've listened to the podcast. I really enjoy it. There's some great tips in there. You've got 4 young children. I don't know how you fit it all in, but you do a bloody good job. Where can they actually find you online? What's the best place to go, Katja? If someone goes, I've never heard of this Katja lady, I want to find out more. Where do they actually go directly online?
I would say find where you're more comfortable to hang out yourself. So if Instagram is for you, you can find me as The Ultimate Farm Wife. On Facebook, I'm Katja Williams, the Rural Mum. So the podcast is on all major podcasting platforms. So you can find us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Samsung, and also over on YouTube. But the best place to really get moving forward towards the end of the year, the best place is to be on the newsletter, which is pinned on my link tree, which is on all my social media platforms.
Perfect. So for anyone who doesn't know, if you just go into the social media, there'll be an area there where you can actually, and I know that's on Instagram, you can go in and you can then subscribe. Is that right, Katja, to the newsletter? Fantastic. Well, I'll go do that right now. I think that'd be a fantastically valuable asset to what I'm doing. So, Katja, this is one question I like to ask everyone because I think it's really good to reflect back on when we were younger and the lessons we teach ourselves. So if you could go back in a time machine to say when Katja was 25, let's say, or in your early to mid-20s, what's the piece of advice you would give your younger self?
Back yourself. My parents did a really great job of raising myself and my sisters to be very strong, very independent, and very well educated. And I think sometimes when we get overwhelmed or we go into new situations, we sometimes forget how switched on we are. And there's always going to be negativity. There's always going to be people bringing us down for whatever purpose that is. And so I would tell myself, back yourself, you've got this. But also most people's actions towards you are not based on your lack of ability, but also it's more of a reflection on themselves. So if they can't see themselves being able to do and achieve something, then they can't see how you're doing it instead of them. So don't take it personally. It's not you. Back yourself.
And as my niece, Charlie, her favourite singer is Taylor Swift, the haters are going to hate.
Haters are going to hate. Don't worry about them. They're not your people.
Well, that's my number one tip. Everyone will have heard that. Back to my younger self is back yourself. Don't be afraid. Let fear fuel you, not stop you from doing it. So look, Katja, thank you so much. We could talk about this for a whole day. I think it's a very big topic, but hopefully everyone's got some great value. I know I have. I'd love it for people out there to share this podcast because I know every family I deal with, without a doubt, has problems with boundaries and difficulties in doing this. So I think this would be a great resource for everyone to get on board with. So share it with all your family and friends. That'd be great. And Katja, good luck with your journey. I love what you're doing. And yeah, if there's an opportunity for us to come back together again and there's some value, I think this would be a great podcast to do again.
Absolutely. Ben, thank you so much for having me.
Well, boundaries. It's a big problem for a lot of families, but I just wanted, before we go, run through a few things that I've worked out here. I think there's a couple of ways I think that this has got to be tackled as a family. And the first one is I think we need to identify that there's a problem, that there's a reason to set boundaries within a family. And that could be, hey, we need to stop talking business in front of the kids, or after 5 o'clock, we don't talk about business, whatever it might be. I need some time in the office. I need some time for myself. We need to have family meetings and carve those out. Like, there's multiple reasons that you could be having it. And then I think the next thing is then to be able to work on yourself, to be able to, as Katja said, work out, why do I want this? Why is it important, etc. And then get past that guilt phase, because I know personally I feel the guilt of doing this myself. The next thing is well, then communication, which is a major problem for most people these days within families, then start to work on the communication. So how do I communicate better at the right time? And Katja mentioned there that, when you are under pressure and it does blow up, etc., it's better to have the conversation when you're in the right frame of mind or in the right mindset rather than when you're emotional or frustrated, etc. And I think that's a really important point. And also the person you're talking to. So down the yards, in the paddock, is probably not the right time to do it. And I think I wrote down here a couple of things is we need to communicate about this, but it's all about setting expectations and having that conversation as a couple or as a family around those expectations. And that could be with in-laws. It could be with older kids that have come back in the business. It could be with employees. I don't know. And then you need to get to the point where you can get a commitment from everyone that these are the boundaries. So you get that, yes, absolutely, we're all committed to this. And as Katja mentioned, tying that back into values. So if, for example, one of my values is strength, and that's strength of the body, the mind, and relationships, is to be able to go, okay, well, these boundaries are required to strengthen our relationships or to strengthen the business, etc. Setting that back to your values means that you're talking about an issue. And I see this around a lot of families is trying to have that conversation is really difficult. The next thing I've wrote down here is progress, not perfection. I see so many people start to talk about boundaries, set them up in the business, and then they fall off the wagon. It's like going to the gym. I try to go to the gym regularly to keep healthy, but I have to be honest, I fall off the wagon. In the last month, I've been the least I've been in the last probably 2 years. And so sometimes you've just got to get back on the horse and go back again and get those boundaries set back up again. I think that's really important because you're never going to get it perfect. Start off small and start getting some traction. But the last thing is, I think this is a really important point that's probably been really hammered home in me over the last 12 months working with really successful families, is that forgiveness needs to be a key requirement within a family, because when you have these discussions, things come out the wrong way. They're not articulated well. People might not take the message on board really clearly. You might get upset. And I think it's really important as a family to remember that if we love each other, if we want strong relationships, again, really important point, that forgiveness has to be at the core of everything you do. So when you have these conversations, if it's a wife with a husband, accept that, hey, the first time you have the conversation with your husband, he might not take it on board and, shout from the rafters how he's going to support you in getting your boundaries. It might take a little bit of time, and forgive the fact that he's not jumped on the bandwagon. If you're a husband where a wife's come and talk to you about boundaries, well, maybe it's about having the conversation and understanding that you need to be a little bit kind and forgive the fact that she's trying to express it to you and may not get that right the first time. So I think forgiveness is a really important point. If I could get anyone to take anything away over the next 6 months, it'd be the importance of forgiveness in a family. Okay, guys, well, that's it for today. I'm going to leave you right here. If you've enjoyed the episode, I'd love it if you'd share it with your family and friends. I think the further we can get these episodes like this out, the better off it'll be. It's a great thank you to me. We really appreciate it. And if you can give us a 5-star rating on the socials or on Spotify or Apple, that would be amazing too. Well, that's it for this week. Hope you've enjoyed the episode, and I'll see you for the next one.